Hey, everybody, and welcome to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. And I'm your host, Olivia Fierro, in studio here with producer Margaret Stewart. So stay tuned for a moment with Margaret. At the end of the podcast, we'll be talking about some favorite kids' books and making some recommendations for holiday shopping. But now, drum roll, please. Our guest is best-selling author and illustrator Jeff Kinney, who is back with the 16th book in the wildly popular Diary of a Wimpy Kid series. The new book is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Big Shot, and of course, it follows the misadventures of Greg Heffley, who goes out for the basketball team this time. There's that to talk about. There's the new Disney Plus movie and so much more. So, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations. I mean, 250 million readers can't be wrong, right?
Thank you very much. What a great introduction. It's nice to talk to you again.
It is so nice to talk to you. I love to wander the bookstore, and as I've told you, my son Nate is a huge fan of your books. And as the numbers progress in the series, you see that number changing on the cover of how many books have been sold, how many copies. And I just think of what it must be like to be you and kind of take a glance at that and go, is this for real? I mean, does that ever lose the wow factor for you?
Yeah, it really is weird. It's crazy. It's crazy that this happened to me. And, I was just working across the street. I couldn't work in the office for various reasons. So I was working in my car in the cemetery and, Plainville Cemetery. And it's so weird to me that I work on these projects in isolation, and then the stories get out into the world. So it's quite a joy and a privilege.
Not only into the world, but in so many countries, in so many languages. I mean, do you collect all of the copies and all of the ways that this is presented around the globe?
Yeah, I know this is a podcast, so I'm going to be very unprofessional and show you on my camera here. You can see there's a wall of books. The books have been translated into 65 different languages, and I think the last one was Somalian. So it's really crazy. Yeah.
I mean, and the idea that you're creating characters that are so very American and so very relatable, but that of that age, that the emotions and the tensions and the disappointments and the embarrassments are that universal, that the stories could be ingested and adored everywhere is incredible. So give us the pitch for what's going on in Big Shot.
Oh boy, Big Shot. It's a sports book. I've been wanting to do a sports book for a long time, and I haven't figured out how to crack it. And I think that I finally did. I'm writing about sports for the kid who wasn't a star athlete, for the kid who was sitting at the end of the bench. And that was me as a kid in certain sports. And I think a lot of kids will be able to see themselves in Greg and his situations.
Mm-hmm. It's got to just be so much fun every time you return to. I mean, you really know these characters that you've created in this series as well or better than you know your own kids, right?
I think in some ways that's true. I've lived with Greg Heffley longer than I've lived with my own kids, just a bit longer. My older son now is 18. He's off to college. And so it's weird. He's grown up into the Wimpy Kid series and has now grown out of the Wimpy Kid series.
So when people go visit him at the dorm and he's got a bunch of Wimpy Kid images and stickers, they're like, wait, that's a little bit weird, aren't you? Are we a little bit old for this? No, I have a good reason.
What's really funny is he's become a little bit internet famous because of Wimpy Kid, because he's done some TikToks and involved Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And so now people recognize him. And sometimes he says he'll be trying to eat his lunch and somebody's taking a photo from him from across the room.
That's amazing. And I did see that he was sharing some of the first images of Big Shot on TikTok. So, make it a family affair. It makes sense. We all have to avoid that cheese touch and, connect in any way we can. There's not only the new book in the series, but also reimagining Diary of a Wimpy Kid in a new way on Disney Plus. And I was just watching the trailer, and it is so exciting and so much fun. And I mean, poor Greg, he is going to be rich and famous someday, but for now he's stuck in the dreaded, we know what, middle school.
Yeah, he's stuck there forever. And I think what I think is really fun about the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series is that middle school really is a terrible time for most people, because it's just, you've got some kids who have hit their growth spurt and they're, deep up the puberty ladder. And then there's kids who are like me who weren't even close, and you've got them all mixed together. I think it's like, that's a tough time. It's not a time that anybody really wants to relive.
It is a terrible time, and it's easy to remember walking that line where you want to feel grown up, and of course they want to be cool and they want to fit in, and also one of the great pleasures at our house has been your side series of giving our best friend Rowley some books of his own, but he is not as encumbered by social pressures to be a cool guy as his best friend is.
Yeah, that's what I like about Rowley, is that he is a kid who isn't in a rush to get to that next level. He's happy with the G level, the G-rated movies, doesn't need to move on to PG or PG-13. He's happy with his 9 p.m. bedtime. I think that he's a pure kid, and he's a good counterbalance to Greg, who's really just straining at the end of childhood.
So tell me a little bit about, as you were getting ready to do this Disney Plus project, because you were completely involved in the animation, right? And what is it like to be able to bring these characters to life in this different way? We've seen them on screen in the live action film.
It's really different because, this is the first time that you feel like the characters are actually coming off the page and in a 3D world. When you see the live action movies, you feel like there's this big leap that you have to make, in watching them. You say, well, does that look like Greg? Not really, but I'll buy it. This is a little bit different because it feels like Greg has, he's leapt from the pages onto the screen.
I'm so excited to watch the whole thing. We have a lot of conversations at my house, and my son is 9, and we watched the Wimpy Kid movie again and again, and he's trying to figure out the math of how old the actors are right now, how old they are then, and I'm like, I can't do this math. I don't know. You just got to be in the movie. Think of it as they don't exist outside of the screen, and in this way, in this new version, they won't exist outside of the screen, and that's going to make it easier for me.
Right, that's good. Yeah, it's funny. I just hung out with those actors who played Greg and Rowley. We went to Disneyland, and they're in their mid-20s now, trying to make their way in Hollywood as grown men. And it's and what's really cool is that those guys really love each other. You see them walking down Main Street at Disney World, and they've got their arm around each other. These guys grew up together. And we formed a bit of a family in a way. So I wonder how those guys are going to, react to the new trailer and all that. It's going to be interesting for them, I think.
That is so cool. That's so cool that you're still in touch. I love that. I want to talk to you. I mean, we think of you as outrageously successful, right? But when you were just beginning, you wanted to be creating as a cartoon for the newspaper, right? And that was a struggle to get to that point, which ultimately led you to the path that you were meant to be on, which was to be creating this line of best-selling books. What challenges did you run into early on in your career, and what lessons do you like to share with young people, and people of all ages, really, who have a dream and are hitting some roadblocks?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge I hit right away is that I wanted to be successful right away. I wanted to create a comic strip and then have somebody say it was great, and then I'd be off and running. And it didn't work out that way for me. I spent about 3 years really trying to become a newspaper cartoonist, put together something that the syndicates would like. And I just couldn't do it. I didn't have the skill. So in a way, I had to accept my limitations as a cartoonist. I had to draw in a style that was more simplified, that was more achievable for me. And, so I'd say to kids, like, try to figure out the place where you fit in the world. And sometimes you don't fit in the place where you think you're trying to fit, and you need to make your own space.
And I imagine, as you look at the different series of kids' books that kind of follow suit and maybe have been inspired by the Wimpy Kid's success, it's exciting to know that you're part of this sort of like legacy of imagination that is creating probably, authors and illustrators and certainly generations of readers.
Yeah, for the first time ever, I'm starting to encounter my earliest readers in their now adult professions. So, I'm encountering people who are 23, 25 years old who work in positions like yours or, in other places in the entertainment industry, in the creative industry as editors. And so it's really cool to see that they grew up on this thing. They were influenced by this thing, but now they've moved on. That's what I hope for as a writer, is that kids will dip into my books and then graduate from my books.
Well, and we talked about this the last time because at that moment in time, I was having a really hard time getting my son to read anything. I mean, it was just reluctant reader, and his big quote was, "Books are for librarians." And so, and so, luckily, through series like yours and the Dog Mans and he started embracing and having fun and wanting to have the flashlight and stay up late at night under the covers and read. And you reminded me that it's important just to love to read. It's not so much about reading the classics. And I had been kind of shoving down his throat The Secret Garden was our project together. And I was like, this is a lot more boring than I remember. I thought this was a great book. So it really is. It's finding that magical time and that kind of blissful relaxation that can happen with a book for kids that are so used to technology.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. Is that adults read for pleasure and kids should read for pleasure too. Of course, you've got to have your vegetables. Sometimes they can't all be desserts, right?
Right.
But that's what school's for, and some kids might discover great literature on their own. But I think that to start with, at least, kids need to put things in front of a kid that addresses their interests. So if their interests are Pokemon or sharks or whatever it might be, video games, even if it's not your interests, what it does is it feeds their feeling of success. And, when they close the back cover of a book or a magazine or something, it makes them want more. And that's what we should do, is feed their interests.
I love the fact that you are also, and in case some of our listeners do not realize, Jeff Kinney, you're also a bookstore owner. So tell me about the space that you have created. And was this something that just, happened to be meant to be, or was this always a dream of yours? I mean, to me, this is kind of the setting of it should be a movie or a television show about your life behind the scenes.
Wow, you flatter me with that. Yeah, we have this bookstore here in Plainville, Massachusetts. So if anybody wants to make a movie about Plainville, we're open for business. In fact, Halle Berry was in this building a few months ago shooting a movie, oddly.
Wow.
It wasn't about my life. It was about aliens or something. But we've got this bookstore here in Plainville. We built it from the ground up, and it's been a really fun, interesting part of our lives. We've got people coming through all the time. Chelsea Clinton, Henry Winkler, Dave Pilkey, who did Dogman and Captain Underpants, Rick Riordan, who did the Percy Jackson series, Raina Telgemeier, who does great graphic novels. We've had just about anybody that you can imagine. And it just keeps things really fresh for us, because you never know what's going to happen here. And this week I have Anthony Horowitz, and so I'm reading a mystery that I never would have read if we weren't having him as an author. So it's been great fun.
Oh, it's got to be. And it's kind of, these places can be really the heartbeat of a community. And we feel this way about Changing Hands here in Phoenix, which you visited on your last book tour. But you're really able to open the door to access talented, creative people or connect people who might otherwise in your community be strangers, and really find that they have something in common and some shared interests and ability to kind of grow and support each other.
I think so. And obviously we've had a breakdown of a lot of different institutions in this country, around the world. But the bookstore is a place where ideas can be shared thoughtfully. I think that's a great thing. I think every community should have an independent bookstore at its center.
Mm-hmm. There's been so much conversation and so many kind of headlines in the news lately about different communities banning books in schools and all of this pushback of different over different reading materials, even in the age range like what we're talking about. How much have you been following that, and from the perspective of a writer, storyteller, and also a bookseller? What would your message be to anybody who is efforting to limit exposure to reading material rather than enhancing or broadening it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Books have been being banned across the country for not very good reasons, actually, and for fear, out of a place of ignorance, honestly. And what's really sad is that these books in particular, often by non-white authors, are getting banned because the populace is afraid of a change, or afraid of new voices being heard, or new points of views being expressed, or just somebody sharing their experience of what it was like growing up. And I think it's just despicable. It's something we need to address. We have to attack that problem, because this is how we develop empathy as human beings, by reading, by learning to see through somebody else's eyes.
Absolutely. And that's one of the greatest gifts that we get from books and from sharing books with other people. We just started reading it at home out loud, Wonder. And so then my son looks at me and goes, "Oh no, you're already crying." And I said, "Well, I do have a heart." I mean, it's just there. It is just putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else is what we really is the greatest gift of any of these stories and any of the types of books that we get to read and enjoy. So, I mean, to be hesitant about that, or afraid of that, or resistance of that is tough to understand. Let me ask you, Jeff, when you are reading for pleasure, what do you gravitate toward now? And I love the concept of you writing out in the cemetery. So are you a thrillers and horror kind of guy on the side, or what?
If I might read a book about politics, or I might read a book about improving or changing the way I think. There's a great book called Range by David Epstein, which is, I think the subtitle is something like Why Generalists Thrive in a Specialist World. And I really like that book, because it just helps you to see things from a different point of view. And it's really had an influence over our parenting of our kids. So, as my kid has gone off to college now, I say to him, don't worry about who you're going to be or who you're supposed to be. Think about, what do you want to learn? What are you interested in learning? Because that will guide you on that path to who you want to become. And so that's, from reading this book, Range, which is very influential.
Mm-hmm. I can't imagine having the conversations that you must get to have with the authors that come through there, and also the people who really just want to hear from you. When you go on your book tours, and I know you had to switch to some virtual stuff, and then you got real creative with this drive-through concept. As you have over the years, though, gone out into these communities to meet your readers and meet their parents, what is the most rewarding part of what they have to say to you about Diary of a Wimpy Kid series?
Oh, that's a great question. There have been some times when I've met kids who have the challenge of autism, and those kids seem to gravitate to my books, and you can tell that the books have made a difference in their lives. They've, they feel kind of connected to Greg. So those have been really special moments. I think in general, we're getting ready to start a tour in a few days, and it's really important for myself and the people that I work with here to see the kids who are receiving these books and reading these books. And not every author is getting to connect with their readers in that way right now. So we're really privileged. Yes, we hand the books off with like a 7-foot pole, make sure nobody catches anything. But it's still a connection, and and I think it's a meaningful connection, especially now.
Oh, definitely. And we know, kids and hygiene, it's not always, 100%. So probably post-pandemic, these long claws will... Yeah, that could be a trend that lasts for a long, long time. is 16 books and counting. These stories, I imagine, in your heart and in your imagination are limitless. Is there ever a moment when you're going to want to see Greg and Rowley and the rest grow up, or we need them to stay here where they are?
I think that we depend on cartoon characters to stay at the same age, right? Like when we think of Donald Duck or Charlie Brown or Mickey Mouse or, Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes, we need them to stay reliable because so much of the world is unreliable and unpredictable that cartoons are one thing that we can count on.
Agreed completely. Jeff, thank you so very much for talking with me again. And I love thinking of you and seeing you in your space with the knowledge of those books around you that you have created that have gone all over the globe and given people laughter and comfort and helped kids in that tough time of life feel seen and understood. And it is it's a true pleasure. And you've brought so much joy into my own personal household. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for bringing joy to your readers or your listeners, actually, right? This has been great. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm and for cheering me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, congratulations. So, of course, the latest in the series is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Big Shot, and you can watch the new Diary of a Wimpy Kid on Disney+. Jeff Kinney, thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
See you at the bookstore sometime. So you're going to have to watch the trailer, and probably maybe by the time we're listening to this, the new animated movie, Diary of a Wimpy Kid on Disney+. I will probably have watched it 7 or 8 times because we've watched the live action one at least that many times, if not more.
And Nate's really big on Wimpy Kid.
Really big on it.
Good for him.
It is great. It's endless entertainment. And, like we were talking about with Jeff Kinney, to have kids enjoy reading is it's like jackpot amazing.
I was thinking about this as he was talking about different series that as I was a kid that I was really interested in that ended up being turned into TV shows or movies. Obviously, things were developed a lot slower in the 90s, but something that I really loved. And so it's great that Nate gets something like that quick. These all these live action things, and he gets to read along and just be excited for that. Yeah. Goosebumps was that way for me. Oh,
yes.
Because Goosebumps was a huge series. Same with Babysitter's Club, but Goosebumps was iconic for a kid going to our tiny school library and checking out every Goosebumps book I could get my hands on 2 or 3 times even. And then eventually it became a TV show, and it was a repurposing or a retelling of those same books. And I got so excited about that because, that's my favorite one. I'm going to watch that episode. And the same with Babysitter's Club, which was, I could sing you the theme song, but I shan't. But
we have talked to a few authors who have said, too. I mean, we usually like to ask people what their first favorite books were or what made them a reader. And Babysitter's Club is one that comes up a lot, too. Yes. And Goosebumps.
Goosebumps came up with the author of The Other Black Girl. She loved Goosebumps as
Zakiya.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Zakiya was really into that, and I made a note because I said, anybody who's inspired by those kinds of books. Mm-hmm. And I got to meet R.L. Stine a few years ago. I think I've talked about that on this podcast before. And with his, he has a graphic novel for kids, a graphic series that is similar in the kind of creepy thriller-esque for kids, or a little, not horror, that's hard to say, but I thought that was so exciting, and I got him to sign this new book, and he talked about, visiting Scottsdale, and he's really loved coming to Arizona before, and it all came, I just got literal goosebumps talking about it, but, going full circle from being a little kid that I, very much like Nate, did not like reading. Yeah. My mother, who is probably listening to this, would attest to that. I hated it, but there were certain things that I did feel drawn to, like Goosebumps, and then to see it progress from, a little kid, and then you see it as a TV show. Now it's on Netflix, so I can rewatch those same episodes and feel that nostalgia. And then meeting the author of my favorite series as a kid was really, really cool. And then seeing how he's still developing stuff for kids now. And I thought that was just so cool. And hopefully Nate will have an experience like that.
Yes. And I think some of those, I mean, they really stand the test of time, too, even if you're digging back. Some books that I remember loving when I was a kid, I just don't think because of the language and they just don't translate as well as what kids are expecting things now that, have kind of a little sass to them and are more, humorous. And so that's why some of these books are so great. But, like Beverly Cleary, I think that's forever. I just had Nate read Adventures of a Fourth Grade Loser. That one worked for him. He was laughing out loud.
Oh, good.
But it's funny to think about what I loved, and I just don't know if a modern kid at this moment would enjoy receiving, say, the Laura Ingalls Wilder Little House on the Prairie series.
As a kid that was given that series I was not into that.
Not into it. That was also my favorite TV show.
Oh, really?
I love that show.
You know who was on that show?
Kyle
Richards. Always a Real Housewives connection. But I agree. I think, I think about The Secret Garden and love the movie. But I don't know if I read it as a kid now, if I would think, oh my gosh, so boring. I had a hard time with Anne of Green Gables even. My sister loved, mom loved, me, no, get it out of here. And I think it's just depending on the kid's personality too.
We have not done at my house yet the Harry Potter series, so because he would see that and he's like, nope, too big. So now we might get around to it because now we're not so afraid of reading. But I always thought, well, I wanted to wait and read that with him.
Yeah.
But I was going through it actually was a Today Show list of the 24 best chapter book series for kids. And among them, sometimes you forget what's designed for kids when you've read them as an adult. And of course, there was like the Percy Jackson, but there's also Hunger Games. And I just remember Tony and I like getting so obsessed with the Hunger Games series and running through an airport because we were on a connecting flight and finishing, I think, the second and the third was available, or maybe it was the first and the second. And it was like, I got to get this book for the next part of this flight or I will explode.
Yes.
And so I forget that that's essentially, written for probably like the middle schooler.
Yeah, I think, is that YA? I feel like, with a topic like Hunger Games, I think that was like more, not middle school. As a middle schooler, I don't know how I'd feel about kids being taken out, shall we say. I did see on this list, ironically, I mean, it's not ironic, but for the Today Show to put Dear Canada on this list is surprising to me because there is the same genre, it's the same kind of concept. It's called Dear America.
Oh, really?
So I'm surprised they put Dear Canada on here. No offense to
the Canadian.
Canada. Wow, Margaret. I swear I can read and talk. But I actually was obsessed with a book from the Dear America series as a kid because these are Scholastic books. And you could also get them at the Scholastic Fair, which if kids don't, I can't believe kids don't get that.
It's all virtual now.
Look, if you're not buying a Zach Hansen or a Leonardo DiCaprio like fan book from the Scholastic Fair, you're not doing it right.
You're not living. You're just not living. It's sad.
But there was, I remember specifically because they're diaries. They're fake diaries, but they're written in the eyes of a young woman going through something of that time period. And the one that I read that I was really into, I can't remember the actual title, but it was about a girl coming to America on like the Mayflower in the 1600s. And her last name was Stewart. And I was like, yeah. And I was a, dumb kid who was like, I was related to this girl. I know it. And everyone's like, oh, that's really cool. And obviously this person didn't exist. But I was going to ride that till the wheels fell off.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Look, guys, I'm so cool. I've got a book with a family member. No, I don't.
Very important, but you still remember it. And that's a series I didn't know anything about, so I need to look those up.
I think the one that they put on the Dear Canada here, the photos didn't print out on your list here, but I believe it was for an Indigenous woman.
Okay.
I can't remember the time period. Did it? Oh, maybe not. But yeah, it's for ages 9 through 12, and it felt like a very specific, these specific girls who are going through things like they mention here, the Great Depression, war in England, prairie girls. So like you just see different time periods, very much like a Four Winds moment for a 9-year-old. but in a diary versus, trying to get through prose or whatever. But
400 some pages of Dust Bowl.
yeah, it's like
Dust Bowl despair and heartbreak.
Yeah, it's a little hard topic for a 9-year-old, but I think that's really exciting that I think Nate's going to love Harry Potter.
I think so too.
He's just got to get over the first book is a lot less thick than the last book.
Yeah, so. I think we can get through the first one at least. But yeah, we've been working our way through a lot of this. Through the Magic Tree House. Oh. We're done with, I think, pretty much all of those. And what I really loved was the Choose Your Own Adventures as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And they do still do those. Mm-hmm. But I noticed that he was cutting some corners and saying, like, I'm done. And I'm like, you really chose all the adventures? Or did you just choose an adventure? Like one.
He sounds like me. I did it.
Yeah.
I did the one.
Good one.
You
it was
did
a real
not
good one.
You didn't say I had to do all of them.
Yeah.
You said I had to choose an adventure, not all the adventures, just one.
Yeah, those just blew my mind as a kid because you could carry. It's sort of like it was like an early version of a Kindle where we're carrying so many books with us at one time, and that was like that one book you were carrying a ton of stories with you.
That's totally true. I didn't think about that, but I love. Well, what about, has he read any Magic School Bus? I know that's probably a little young.
We did. We've done that. And we did. They have a very cute show on Netflix right
now.
The
original?
The new version. Mm-hmm.
Well, the original, when the bus gets small and goes into the human body, that's probably the best episode.
Yes.
You learn so many weird things about your body that you didn't know as a young kid. So I'm glad what about the Berenstain Bears?
Those, we're a little too old for those now. Mm-hmm.
But did he like them?
Yes.
Was he a big fan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good old Berenstain Bears.
Okay, a walk down memory lane, and it is kind of nice to remember what it was that you liked when you were little, and just to see that kind of think about that light up when you're. I mean, it's really good to try to give books, especially for we always have so many kids' birthday parties and stuff. So try to think of what's. What people might enjoy.
We have some, the Interesting Facts book.
Facts.
That's a good one.
Those are amazing. So by National Geographic, and they're always coming out with different books with facts or all about animals, and they're so vivid and so much to see. And I mean, you can pass a lot of time in the car that way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Oh, did you ever read Bread and Jam for Francis or any of the Francis books?
Francis, yes.
So I'm trying to find those. I don't really know.
I wonder if they're out of print.
I don't know. That will really bother me if it is. I don't think that they are, but
because she was a picky little eater, right?
Yes, I actually love. I must have known as a young kid. I like a list. They list all the foods that she was eating or didn't want, like the soft-boiled egg and stuff. And I just remember reading that and being so intrigued by this list of food. Little kid, very hungry, but my friend has a 3-year-old. She'll be 4 in May, and I'm like, when is an appropriate time?
It's always an appropriate time.
And she loves reading too. I've already read her Berenstain Bears book, so she is understanding. So I think it's time to introduce Francis.
Doesn't they just go up on the shelf at the very least?
Oh yeah.
I remember Francis.
Isn't that a good one?
Didn't she get a little baby sister and she did not want a baby sister? Oh yeah.
I can't remember her little sister's name, but yeah. And I just loved her sitting under the table singing her sad little song about her soft-boiled egg. Oh my gosh, just the cutest.
Oh, that's a happy memory. On that note, I'm picturing that. I can actually picture the cover of Francis. So thank you, Margaret. This Moment with Margaret. Margaret, by the way, was just back from Mexico. So
yes.
I don't imagine you were reading in Mexico too much, were you?
I actually did read. I finished 3 books while I was there.
Oh.
Well, I had started a few and I was finishing them up. And I got about halfway through a book that I'm going to tell April Warnicki about, called The Weather Girl.
Oh, I have this in my Kindle.
I just started it. Yes. I'm really enjoying it. I've highlighted some things about the news business that I think is very funny or entertaining. But for our listeners out there, we've talked to TJ Newman of Falling, and I was sitting there at the concierge at my beautiful resort in Cabo San Lucas and waiting to book my COVID test, and I looked at the little library shelf they have there where people can drop their books if they're traveling. And I looked over and I saw Falling by TJ Newman on the shelf, and I thought, oh my gosh, like of all of the books,
wow.
I thought that was crazy. I said, hey guys, that's a Phoenix author. We've had her on the podcast. She's incredible. We just our most recent book club pick, and she joined us on the book club discussion. I thought that was just so it was a really cool moment for me. Yeah.
Muchísimas gracias.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. Keep reading. Let us know what you're reading. And if you're going to give a gift for this holiday season, what book would it be? Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.